Wright, Judge Lynch, Judge Flory, Judge Rodenberg, and Judge Bernhardson. Judge Wright presiding.
Good afternoon. Please be seated. Good afternoon, members of the public. I want to thank you on behalf of the panel for your presence here this evening, your great interest in this important work, and the contributions that you will make to the process in helping us do the work that we may be called to do. My name is Judge Wilhelmina Wright. I am a judge on the Minnesota Court of Appeals based in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I am the presiding judge of the Special Redistricting Panel. I'll ask each of my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good evening, John Rodenberg, District Court Judge in Brown County, 5th Judicial District. I'm chambered in New Ulm.
My name is Ed Lynch. I'm the Chief Judge of the 1st Judicial District, and I'm chambered in Dakota County.
I am Jim Flory. I'm the Chief Judge of the 6th Judicial District. I'm chambered in Virginia.
My name is Ivy Bernhardson. I am in the 4th Judicial District, which is Hennepin County, and currently serve in family court there.
Allow me to set the context for the proceedings this evening. As the Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court has ordered, and as this panel has recognized, our purpose this evening and going forward is to adopt and release congressional and legislative redistricting plans only in the event that the Minnesota legislature does not enact redistricting plans by the statutory deadline. While the panel wishes to give the legislature every opportunity to complete redistricting, we must proceed with our work so that we are prepared to act, if necessary, by February 21st, 2012, the statutory deadline for redistricting. As this panel stated in its September 12th order, no aspect of our work precludes the legislature and the governor from reaching an agreement on redistricting legislation. The redrawing of our state's congressional and legislative districts involves many considerations, not the least of which is the effect of redistricting on the people who have a stake in this process, and that is all of the people of this state. Public hearings like this one, held this evening, have been held by those responsible for redistricting in states around the country and by the Special Redistricting Panel 10 years ago. It is our belief that the redistricting process is enriched by the voices of Minnesotans who can share with us their local perspectives and enhance our understanding of their communities. When our nation was founded more than 230 years ago, the idea of a governing democracy was a revolutionary idea. Today, more than 150 years since Minnesota gained statehood, we thank you for ensuring that the ideals and the reality of our democracy continue to thrive. We welcome the comments of those who have registered to speak at this hearing. The speakers will be called one at a time in the order in which they are listed in the register of confirmed speakers. Our marshal will assist us in staying within the 5-minute time limit for each speaker. And my fellow judges and I will be listening carefully to each speaker. We may, in fact, ask questions to clarify or better understand the speaker's comments. Our court reporter, who's located over to my left, will take down the comments of each speaker, which will be available for the lawyers, for the parties in this case, and for us to review. In addition to the oral comments that are made here tonight, written comments may be submitted to the panel by the United States mail or by email, no later than October 21st of this year. For more details on how to submit written comments, please visit the panel's website, or please pick up a sheet of paper that is on the table at the back of the room, which has instructions from the court's order regarding that. Please be mindful that this is a court proceeding. With many thanks to the Minneapolis Public School Board, This is our courtroom for this evening. If you have not done so already, please turn off your cell phone. Cell phones, cameras, and private recording devices must be turned off during the entire hearing unless you have already received the court's permission to utilize a camera. And that has been extended only to the press under the court's guidelines for press coverage. If you need to leave during the proceeding, please try to do so in between speakers. Because this is a matter of great public interest, members of the press are present here this evening. Please be respectful of the speakers and the listeners by not talking, adding commentary, or applause during or after the presentation. Again, on the behalf of the panel, thank you so much for your interest and participation in this.
Can you hear me? Or try to do this. Hello, my name is Gerald Strauss. I'm a lifelong resident of Minnesota, and I recently moved to the Twin Cities this past May, and will be relocating to Minneapolis next month. I'm a quality assurance engineer at McAfee in St. Paul, Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I come before you today to express my concerns about maintaining and establishing legislative districts that represent all Minnesotans. Recent census data shows Minnesota's minority growth skyrocketing, and our legislative districts should reflect these changes. According to the Minnesota Demographers website, the African American community has increased by almost 60%, the Asian community by almost 51%, and the Latino community by 75%. Many minority groups are most dependent on the public space, including but not limited to public education, public transportation, affordable housing, and health care. Drawing legislative districts that establish a more difficult environment to elect minorities to the legislature could negatively affect public policy for many years to come. James Madison wrote in Federalist No. 10, "Liberty is to faction what air is to fire, an ailment without which it instantly expires. Institutionalizing districts that either eliminate or diminish the voices of Minnesota's racial and political minorities would limit the melting pot of ideas that is the Minnesota State Legislature." Minorities are greatly underrepresented in the Minnesota legislature. Minnesota has a minority population of 14.7% according to the 2010 census, which equates to 29 members. Currently, there are only 6 members who represent minority populations, and there are currently no Asian or Native American members. Minnesota's legislative districts should also be drawn to enable political minorities such as women and the LGBT community, which are not always reflected among racial minorities. According to the U.S. Census, Minnesota has two of the largest gay populations, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and there are same-sex coupled households in each of Minnesota's 87 counties. In summary, legislative districts should be drawn to reflect the changing demographics of this state, which includes both racial and political minorities. The more people, ideas, and varying perspectives will generate public policy that is reflective of the entire state. The North Star has always been a guiding light for all. Minnesota can continue that tradition by guiding everyone and representing the needs of every Minnesotan. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you on this important topic. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ron Touche. I'm a resident of Elk River, Minnesota, Sherburne County. I'm a business owner. I'm a volunteer, and I'm a resident in a community, a resident of a county, and a resident of a state that we can all be very proud of. And tonight we have a big job. Well, the job that we have isn't just tonight, but the job that's in front of this panel and our legislature is one that's very unique and has long-lasting ramifications. I've had the privilege of working throughout Minnesota. My company is a real estate company, and while I concentrate primarily in the Twin Cities with special emphasis in the Northwest Corridor, Sherburne County, Wright County, Hennepin County, Anoka County, Mille Lacs. I've also worked as far as the Iron Range and as far south as Rochester. And it's given me a perspective of community. And that's really what I want to talk to you tonight about is community. I read in the order that this panel gave, it talks about communities of interests. And it was interesting. I would point out that I think it's more of communities of partnerships. Our communities in Minnesota, our cities in Minnesota, our adjacent cities in Minnesota, our counties, all partner together now more than ever before. We have shared services between cities. We even have shared services between companies. You see it in the nonprofit world, you see it in the business world, and you see it in the public entity world. And the first thing I want to talk about is the city of Elk River itself. It's a unique situation. It's a split city. We have two different representatives representing the city, both of them relatively far away. It tends to fracture the city. It fractures the partnerships that happen within that city. It fractures the opportunities for economic development. I have a unique perspective on that as well. I'm the president of the Elk River Economic Development Authority, and I look at the challenges that a fractured representation structure has within the city itself in attracting new economic development and retaining our existing businesses. The representation that we have is reaching to the left and to the right, meaning that there's two different representatives that need to pay attention to this little corner of their area, and sometimes we get lost. So the urging that I would give to this panel is to look at the city of Elk River and all cities and look at how we can keep those partnerships together and keep those cities as one entity and represented by one entity. Secondly, I want to talk about counties. Sherburne County is a unique county. It's a gateway county to the north. Some people say it's rural, some people say it's city. The reality is it's a little bit of both. And sometimes it gets lost. And I think we have a ring of counties around the Twin Cities metro area that are in that same boat. And I would urge this body to look at those counties, those gateway counties to the outstate Minnesota, and recognize that the folks that are in those counties primarily work close to home or typically within the cities and are more closely aligned with the city. But more importantly, they're closely aligned with the cities around them. For example, Elk River is aligned with Zimmerman, Big Lake, Becker, even Otsego and Wright County, and we have partnerships with those, and it's important to preserve the ability for these cities to partner with the cities around them. And the only way to do that is to ensure that the representation, the lines that you draw for that representation include those communities of partnerships. It talks about similarities and cultural and ethnic and political and all that, and that's wonderful, but we need to make sure that our cities, our residents of those cities, our counties can partner with each other, with their neighbors. It's very difficult to attract development. It's difficult to attract opportunity when you have split representation in St. Paul. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak tonight, and I want to just talk one last moment about the opportunity for you to unify cities, to unify counties, and to unify the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Touche.
Judge Wright, Mr. Touche, can you identify the two districts for us that are divided in
Be
Elk
16
River?
and 48.
16 and 48? Maps are kind of small in this book. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening, Your Honors. First, I wanted to just take a moment to thank you all for allowing people to have input on such an important issue. My name is Christy Jo Fogarty, and I have been a member of the Farmington City Council for almost 9 years, so I'm going to give you that local perspective that you were hoping to get some information on. I would like to propose on, or comment on the proposed Senate District 54 and House District 54B. Currently, Farmington is in 36 and 36B. This area encompasses the city of Farmington and several surrounding townships. I support the proposed district change, and this is why. The city of Farmington has had a long-standing joint powers agreements with several of the surrounding townships, including joint powers agreements for both fire and ambulance services. As a member of the Farmington City Council, I've had the opportunity to serve on both the Empire Farmington Planning Committee and the Castle Rock Farmington Planning Group with our surrounding townships. Over many years, we have developed an excellent working relationship leading to several unopposed annexations and orderly annexation agreements with both townships. And for those of you in local government that are next to townships, you know how difficult those can be. It has been very important to us that our representation at the Capitol has been and should continue to be the same when it comes to these important issues. Annexation issues are commonly brought up at the legislature, as are the rules regulating the who, what, when, where, and how joint power agreements can be made and how they are constructed. Quite often, these agreements take a lot of negotiations and cooperations as cities and townships function quite differently. Knowing we share the same representation in the legislature helps greatly. Ensure that our hard work is not splintered by state political boundaries with different agendas and constituencies. Farmington is a unique city as it is largely rural farmland with a growing suburban population. We find ourselves identifying more with the small town feeling of community that doesn't stop at the city limits. Our relationship with the surrounding township has only become more important with shrinking resources and in Farmington's unique case, a still growing population as we have the highest number of new building permits in Dakota County. Please help ensure these relationships stay intact. I would also like to comment on the additions of the Elko New Market and portions of Scott County to the district. In addition to being a member of the Farmington City Council, I've also been a member of the Vermilion River Watershed Planning Committee, a tributary to the Mississippi watershed. I am also a governor-appointed member of the Board and Water and Soil Resources, better known as Bowser, representing all cities in the metropolitan area. This portion of Scott County is in the Vermilion River watershed, along with Farmington and the surrounding townships. You may ask why this is important. One of the things that Bowser consistently struggles with is watersheds that are set by political boundaries and not hydrologic boundaries as they should be. This district, however, would very closely match both the political and hydrologic boundaries. This would reduce potential conflicts between the legislature and the Bowser Board and make for good planning, hence good government. As you can see, I have a broad understanding of the many aspects of this proposed district and can tell you it would work well in this area of Dakota County. Thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions if you have any.
When you say you support the proposed change, are you talking about the plan that was vetoed?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that's L1101-1, is that right?
And you, ma'am, you were mentioning the townships around Farmington, and that sounded like there were some joint powers agreements and some alignment there, and I caught the name Castle Rock.
Yes.
If there were others, I missed them.
Farmington is surrounded actually by 3 townships. In this proposed district, I believe there are 6 townships, but Farmington is surrounded by Empire, which is very unique in itself because it has both water and sewer availability to its township residents. Castle Rock Township and Eureka Township.
Okay.
Almost all are very large agriculture farming communities.
But those are the 3 that
Those are the 3 that have direct contact with the borders of Farmington.
Okay.
Our other border is the city of Lakeville.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fogarty. Your comments also.
Good evening, Your Honors. I am Elsa Levine, a Latina and bilingual educator, and I'm here to urge you to focus in our Minnesota future, our children. As a bilingual educator, I teach at Metro State University in the Urban Teacher Program. I know firsthand how the minority population of the state has greatly improved the demographic and economic growth of several rural communities, such as Wilmar in Kandayohi County and Marshall in Lyon County. Just 10 years ago, their school districts were faced with such a low enrollment that schools were closing. Fast forward 10 years, the Wilmar Public School District is building new schools to accommodate their increased number of K-12 students. On the other hand, the Small Business Administration data states it has been an increase of 80% growth in Latinos-owned businesses in the state, only in the last 10 years. I'll quote Kent Martin, DFL party chair. Part of the redistricting process is to make sure that this new rapidly increasing community starts to become established, that their political strength is not diluted but is reflected in the new lines. End quote. Communities such as Somalis in Rochester, in St. Cloud, Minneapolis, and Latinos in Ramsey County, Hennepin, and Stern County. If it were not for the increased number of Latinos and minorities, Minnesota would have lost a congressional seat this year. As stated, the increase has been greatest in cities in rural Minnesota and in the suburbs of the Twin Cities. The court panel should take this into consideration and draw legislative and congressional districts that give minority populations a greater opportunity to elect the representatives they choose to Congress and the state legislature. I urge you to consider that minorities are fairly represented in the plan. As a Latina community organizer, I question the political subdivision shift. It's a matter of timing. The deadline to represent the final version, you well know, is February 21st. The GOP has stated that they are keeping their caucus date firm 2 weeks before that date because their results are not binding. Questioning that, I quote Christine Sosain, the DFL party press secretary. She says, one potential problem with the early caucus date is how it will impact the state legislature races. It's likely that the candidates from the Minnesota House, Senate, and Congress won't know exactly where the boundary of their districts are. That's because the court-appointed panel on redistricting won't release its map until February 21st. Candidates may be forced to organize their caucuses in precincts that they may not represent after the new lines are drawn. In conclusion, these maps really define political power for the next 10 years. How are the school district boundaries affected by this decision? My focus is in our Minnesota future, our children. How these maps affect education. Please take a look at the state of education funding today. Most school districts in Minnesota are faced with extra levy referendum just to pay for the basics. Teachers and paraprofessionals are laid off. Therefore, larger classes are a norm. About 36 to 40 students per classroom with one teacher, and the basic programs that enhance students' learning, music, art, and after-school programs are a luxury for most school districts. Therefore, who gets to represent all school children does matter. The decision of a selected group of senators or representatives are keeping our schools hostage to their political philosophy. I urge you to consider all school children, including the 75% increase of Latino children in our state in the last 10 years. They must be represented fairly in this plan. Muchas gracias.
Madam Chief Justice, Your Honors, may it please the Court, my name is Eric Margolis. I am a resident of Hopkins, where I am a single father of 2 children, a systems engineer, and I come before you today as not a partisan to talk to you about and hopefully impress upon this panel with my testimony and those following these proceedings the importance that redistricting must aim for equality. As a resident of Hopkins, I have seen my city's transformation and how our community has benefited from an increase in the total minority population, an increase which has also been in many other suburbs and communities across the state, from which those communities have also benefited. In fact, according to the 2010 U.S. Census, the state of Minnesota's total collective minority population is nearly 15%, with the largest increase from the 2000 census seen amongst Hispanics and Latinos, 74.5%, African Americans, 59.8%, and Asian Americans, 50.9%. Likewise, the minority populations of Hopkins has also increased to 30 to 40%. Neighboring St. Louis Park in Golden Valley has a minority population of 20%, as does Edina, Eden Prairie, and Minnetonka. When I think about these communities, my neighbors, I see a district almost in and of itself. One similarly familiar to Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District before previous redistricting years. While the state of Minnesota's minority population has grown exponentially over the past 10 years, primarily in the 1st and 2nd ring suburbs, both language and racial minority communities remain vastly underrepresented in our Minnesota legislature. Representation from these underrepresented communities in the Minnesota Senate is just 3%, and the Minnesota House of Representatives has the same ratio of 3%. Today, there are no Asian American legislators nor Native American legislators, and only 1 African American and 1 Hispanic Latino representative in the Minnesota Senate. If minority representation in the legislature equaled the same percentage seen in our state's population, there could be 29 representatives from these communities. But today, there are only 6. Some may argue that the lack of minority representation in our legislative houses is not a byproduct of how district lines are drawn. Others, including myself, believe that the way district lines are drawn put voters together in groups. Some voters are drawn, some voters are kept together in one district, others are separated by different districts. The way the lines are drawn keep a community together or split it apart, changing whether it has a representative who feels responsible for its concerns. The way the lines are drawn can impact who wins an election, and ultimately, the way lines are drawn can change who controls the governing body and who can change which policies get passed into law. Public policy issues such as transportation, affordable housing, education, healthcare have distinct impacts on people of color, and therefore it is important that district lines are not drawn in a way that deny racial and/or language minority voters an equal opportunity to participate in the political process and elect representatives of their choice. Redistricting must aim for equality, and ultimately, this panel may draw new lines, which will define those boundaries for the next decade. I pray that in the court's discussions, deliberations, and decisions, it will continue to strive for equality. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice and Your Honors. I'm Henry Moore, and I'm from Duluth. Thank you for the honor of me being included in those allowed to speak for our communities. I do not represent the Duluth DFL, and I am not on their steering committee. I vote Democratic and work to get progressive candidates elected to the city council, the school board, the state legislature, and races. I do not speak in behalf of any politicians of either party. I have been retired for the last year, and before that I worked as a basic literacy instructor at the federal prison in Duluth. I want to talk about 3 issues that are important to me and to most of Northeast Minnesota. Point 1, and most important, there is a need to keep economic units together as much as possible. There are 9 of these in the state. In this case, northeastern Minnesota, including Carleton County, St. Louis County, Lake and Cook counties, and sometimes Koochiching and Aiken, are one viable economic and integrated economic unit and need to address the legislature and Congress with one voice. Do not divide us for congressional representation. There are subunits within this that can be broken out for legislative districts. In other words, the Iron Range and Northeast Minnesota working together basically have one voice and one set of economic interests: forestry, mining, shipping, medical, and tourism. This unit needs to be kept together. Point 2, northwestern Minnesota is agricultural and thus very different set of interests and concerns. I would politely ask you not to make one congressional district out of all of northern Minnesota and thus dilute the St. Louis County, Northeast Minnesota vote for political advantage, as the legislature attempted to do recently. Separate congressional representation for northwest Minnesota, northeast Minnesota has existed for 120 years. Northwest and Minnesota and northeast Minnesota assembled as a whole have not been tied together as any kind of economic or voting entity that I know of ever. Point 3, do not include us with the St. Cloud. Almost everyone I talk to up there is adamant that we not be included with St. Cloud. We are very different populations, and each one needs its own voice. Duluth and St. Cloud are metro centers for clearly distinct regions of the state. Now I realize that the 8th Congressional District needs to be enlarged, so whether it moves further south into the northern suburban ring or further west toward the agricultural district or some of both, I cannot say. I know you will determine that in your best judgment if you have the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for your comments. They are submitted, and you gave me a very nice promotion that I'm not entitled to. So I am a judge on the Minnesota Court of Appeals. All of us were appointed to this panel by the Chief Justice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lori Stee.
Thank you, Your Honors. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Lori Stee, and I am a 20-year resident and employee in the city of St. Paul. I am a resident of the A side of Senate District 65, including Frogtown, Rondo Summit, Mount Airy, and North End neighborhoods. And I'm going to keep my comments brief, making just a couple of salient points. It is in the best interest of the people of our district that current boundaries are kept, with adjustments for population growth, maintaining the St. Paul Planning District boundaries that effectively define and help us to serve communities of interest. And to the degree that it is possible, adjustment should be made within Ramsey County borders. I am deeply concerned with the proposal to use University Avenue as a district boundary for a couple of reasons. Number one, first, because University Avenue would be an arbitrary boundary, just as Interstate I-94 was arbitrary dividing line when it was constructed in the 1960s, running through the Rondo neighborhood. The neighborhood, the community itself continues to thrive on both sides of I-94 and is connected by those the crossings that run across the freeway, primarily in our Rondo neighborhood. You get to, Snelling Avenue and those, then the interstate becomes a more effective dividing line between communities. But yes. South, let's see, Dayton, probably somewhere in that area, and on the north, I'm not exactly sure on that. Above I-94, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not. It's not coming to me right at the moment, but so yeah.
I can just follow up.
Sure.
You're in 65A, which currently goes south of 94 some distance.
Yes.
I'm not as familiar with the area as you are, obviously. How far is Dayton where the line is now?
You know what? And I don't know that either.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
I don't have the street names aren't on my map. That's
I should have done a little homework before I showed up. I didn't know there'd be questions. So the second point is that clearly the purpose of a road is not to divide but to serve a community, and dividing our district along University Avenue, the light rail corridor, would split a community with profoundly deep and strong common interests, and we feel it would weaken or eliminate the accountability to the residents and the businesses on either side immediately of the corridor, and creating something of a no man's land in a sense. Who will be accountable for that, for the businesses in particular along the University Avenue corridor? And as previously been cited, the vast majority of the population growth in Minnesota has been in language and minority communities, and yet the representation in our government remains at 3%. We need to work to increase, not decrease, the potential for just representation. And we have not done a very good job of that. And the one example I'll give you is that in 2010, St. Paul made history for the first time by electing the first black woman to represent the state in the legislature. And Representative Moran is only the second black woman to hold a seat in the 134 body House of Representatives, of course, followed by Neva Walker in Minneapolis some years ago. Thank you.
Your Honors, my name is Jules Goldstein. I've lived most of my life in St. Paul in the current Senate District 64, which is the southwestern corner of the city. And although the house I lived in was at various times in Senate District 48 and 63, they keep renumbering the same district over time. In 2007, I retired and moved out west and now live in St. Louis Park. I've been active in government, politics, and community organizations for nearly 50 years. I am a past treasurer of Minnesota Common Cause, past president of the United Jewish Fund and Council, and several other organizations. My first involvement in politics in government came nearly 50 years ago when I was assigned as in a high school social studies class going to a precinct caucus, and it sort of stuck. Minnesota politics are interesting. It is one of the few states in which the political parties are organized from the bottom up. It all begins at precinct caucuses, and from the precinct caucus are elected local party officers and delegates, and from those the state officers and endorsements occur. In this year, by state law, the precinct caucuses will occur on February 7th. There was opportunity to change that date if agreement could be made between the two major parties. That agreement did not occur within the deadline. Now, the difficulty with that and with the process you are undergoing is that the precinct caucuses occur on February 7th. That will be electing delegates to conventions that will be organized around the new districts, because both the Republicans and the Democrats in Minnesota, for the most part, organize their local units around Senate and House districts. That means people will be attending conventions or caucuses, trying to be elected to conventions without knowing which ones they might be going to or which days they may occur on, which is going to mean a number of people will not be able to arrange it properly to attend. The lack of knowledge is going to be a problem. For that reason, I urge that if at all possible, you release preliminary maps prior to February 7th. Under the ruling, I realize that no action of this panel can preclude the legislature or the governor if they act before February 7th. That is true even if you do release maps early. And so I urge you to consider doing that, because you can always be overwritten by the governor and the legislature until February 20th. So if it would be possible to release maps so that people going to caucuses on February 7th have some idea what districts they will be in, it would make life much easier for all involved. I note that the order that created this panel said that although future agreement on redistricting legislation by the legislative and executive branches remains a possibility, in the light of the significant duties and responsibilities to be undertaken, responsibilities undertaken also applies to the political parties, and they are in a bind. So that was the major point I wanted to make. I should also say that before I retired, I lived in a nice house in St. Paul. It was 3 blocks from the nearest movie theater, a 15-minute walk from a library. I had almost a dozen restaurants within a half mile of my house. I was rather nervous when I moved to the suburbs, where I live in a condo, 3 blocks from the nearest movie theater, a 15-minute walk from the nearest library, and within a half a mile of at least a dozen restaurants. The difference between the central cities and the first-ring suburbs is much less than I expected. I was nervous for no reason. In creating communities, the boundaries connecting areas between the central cities, the first-ring suburbs, and even the second-ring suburbs are minor. Thank you.
Your Honors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to talk about the importance of keeping intact communities, neighborhoods, particularly in the urban centers, Minneapolis and St. Paul. I would like to use as an example of what not to do, what was proposed as 67B on the east side, southeast corner of St. Paul, where they took a district that was all within Ramsey County, all within the city of St. Paul, chopped up what is a neighborhood of Dayton's Bluff, and then crossed county boundaries, crossed city boundaries, multiple communities, dragging it down to Gray Cloud Island. It really broke up natural communities, crossed many boundaries. I think it's important that, for those who may or may not be familiar with the importance of neighborhoods in the urban centers, is these are not just, they are formally recognized, for example, in St. Paul and Minneapolis. There are elected representatives, boards, and funding, and the boundaries are decided by the municipalities. They act in many ways and in conjunction with other communities. And again, using Dayton's Bluff as an example and the communities along the river, the communities of interest, Dayton's Bluff is tied to District 1, which is Highwood, Battle Creek, and to Lower Town, which is downtown, and to the west side. There are generational connections in the Hispanic community between Dayton's Bluff and the west side that have been divided by past boundary divisions that used to be connected. As far as day-to-day living and issues that come up, for example, there are historic districts that are designated in these adjoining neighborhoods that impact these communities. These communities of the west side, downtown, Dayton's Bluff, and Battle Creek Highwood are all within a federally designated national park. And they are all within a state-designated critical area. We just went through rulemaking that all the communities participated in for that. They all abut Tier 1 reliever airport for the MAC, which we all have appointed members to the board that oversees it in conjunction with MAC. There's a number of relationships that are very important to maintain in these communities. In some of the other work, these were not respected at all. I would also like to point out, as far as St. Paul itself and Ramsey County, there are essentially 4 districts that could be supported by Senate districts that could be supported by the city of St. Paul, and you can keep them largely within the city boundaries and within the county rather than jumping across lines. If you take 67B, or Senate District 67 as it used to be located, it used to contain the west side, part of downtown, Dayton's Bluff, and Highwood and Battle Creek. I would argue that that is the best combination that you could have forward. Essentially, you would have 4 quadrants in St. Paul. Districts, just for your number's sake, districts 1, 3, 17, and 4, as far as the district councils, if you combine those, that would be Senate District 67. They're all interconnected on many interests. If you then took the northeast quadrant, essentially the land north and east of downtown, the land southwest of downtown, and the land northwest of downtown, those are the most following community boundaries, existing community boundaries, I think would provide the best communities of interest and could be easily done. And to the degree that you have to move outside of the city boundary, if you use what is currently the deviation, and that is to the northwest, in other words, essentially up to Falcon Heights in that area, that would be the most natural way to deviate to the degree that one has to. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. what the districts, I use the district council boundaries to help out. District 3 is what is called WESCO, WSCO. It's a West Side Community Organization, and that would be the west side. Downtown is District 17. Dayton's Bluff is District 4, and the neighborhoods that are Conway, Highwood, Battle Creek is District 1 Community Council. And that would be pretty close to the old, previous version of 67, worked well. And then the district north of there, which used to be a district, it would be essentially the north and east of the downtown. It would come across to about 35, and then be the northwest, and then the southwest. Again, it could be adjusted to match, try and match as closely as possible the district council neighborhood boundaries and other boundaries of interest. But I think generally speaking, those fit the best as far as keeping intact neighborhoods to the greatest extent possible. Thank you. Appreciate it.